Okay, so let's look at a more complete example as far as the statement of cash flows operating section using the direct method goes. So I have up here a sample income statement and balance sheet from year 2011 to 2012. And the first thing we're asked to calculate here is the collections from customers. So if I have collections from customers, I know I need to go to my income statement and find my current year's sales revenue. And current year's sales revenue, it appears, are $25,118. So that's our starting point for calculating collections from customers. And that's from right here. And then to that, I need to look here and see. I need to add any decreases in accounts receivable or subtract any increases. Well, what happened to our accounts receivable on our balance sheet? And I will try and highlight it here for you. So accounts receivable went from 605 to 804 in 2011. So we had an increase there, right? We had an increase from, doesn't want to cooperate. We had an increase here from 605 to 804, which is a $199 increase in accounts receivable. And we're going to subtract that increase. And if we add those two together, remember this is a negative, put it in parentheses here, we get $24,919. Alright, my pen isn't working too well. Let's see if we can fatten it up a bit. Alright, so I thickened things up a little bit for you so you can see that there. So my collections from customers showing on the operating section of my statement of cash flows using the direct method will show collections from customers of $24,919. Let's head on down and we'll do another one here. This one says direct payment method for payments of inventory. So again, I've got my little cheat sheet out here. I know I need to start with cost of goods sold and then add any increases in inventory or subtract a decrease, or add a decrease in accounts payable and subtract an increase. So let's see what we got going on here. So if we start with our cost of goods sold, that is, looks like $18,074. Then let's go ahead and look and see what happened to our inventory in that same time period. So our inventory, it looks like, went from 2833 to 3483. So that's an increase in inventory. So an increase in inventory gets added. And that increase is $650. And then let's look at what happened to our accounts payable. Well, our accounts payable also had an increase this time. Looks like of $180. So we can see an increase in accounts payable down here gets subtracted. So I'll put that, and then I'll subtract my increase in accounts payable. Now if I add all of that information together, I can see my payments for inventory were $18,544. Okay, let's do a few more. This one asks for payments for other operating expenses, and again I posted the little cheat sheet here. We need to look at increases or decreases in prepaid expenses and accrued liabilities. So prepaid expenses are things like prepaid rent, supplies, prepaid insurance, and quite honestly I'm not seeing any of those items here. But I do see accrued liabilities right now, and I see accrued liabilities. Come on. And I show that there was an increase from 847 to 940. So let's go ahead and find the starting point here, which is our operating expenses, and that comes right off of our income statement. So operating expenses, $4,801. And then we didn't have any of those, so I'm not going to worry about that. But I did have an increase then in my accrued liabilities that needs to be subtracted. And that increase is $93 from $847 to $940. So that means $4708 is going to be my payments for operating expenses. Okay. Next one. Now let's look at acquisitions of property and equipment. And we did a T account similar to this earlier. So let's go ahead and set that up again. Okay, so if we look at our property and equipment account, which is right here, we see that the beginning balance would be $33,071. And my ending balance would be $4,095. We also need to look at depreciation expense for the year, which was $269. That will be a credit. And then we need to analyze, did we have any acquisitions or any disposals of equipment, I guess is the correct word. So if we take $33.71 and we subtract the $269, we're not going to get $495 here. So it does look like we bought some other property because we need some more debits here in order to increase this $33.71 enough to get up to $4,095. So the easiest way I see to do that is to take the $40.95, go ahead and subtract the depreciation expense of $269. Oh, I guess we need to add that because it needs to be larger. And then subtract the beginning balance of $33.71. And if we do that, we should get acquisitions of property of $993. And again, we can double check that figure now, so that will be the amount here. So if you add $993 plus $33.71 and you subtract $269, we should get our ending balance in our property and equipment. Okay, and it does work out just fine. Let's do another one. This is long-term borrowing. So let's go ahead and look at our long-term liabilities section of our balance sheet. And this one is pretty straightforward. It looks like we went from 185 to 200. So if we take 200 minus the 185, that means we had an increase of probably 15,000 in long-term liability. So we had to borrow 15,000 more, or 15, whatever the number might be, more in our long-term borrowing. So we just took our ending balance minus that beginning balance, and that gave us our long-term borrowing. Okay. Next example asks us to calculate proceeds from issuance of common stock. So again, we can kind of see here my common stock has a balance. We can pretty much do the same thing that we did with our long-term borrowing. So we take our ending balance, which is $679, and we subtract the beginning balance of $479. That indicates to me that I have proceeds from issuance of common stock of $200 because that balance went up. So proceeds from issuance of common stock. Great. $200. Last one. This time it's asking for payments of cash dividends. And really what we're going to need to do here is revisit how our retained earnings balance is calculated, or if you remember back to our statement of retained earnings. Okay, so if you remember, our statement of retained earnings starts with the beginning balance in our retained earnings. And that is down here at the very bottom. So the beginning balance will be $3,994. And then we added net income. So net income we see is $14.43. So we can add those two together. 3, carry the 1, 4, 5. Okay, $5,437. Then you subtract dividends, which is what we're trying to find. And once we do that, we get to our ending balance, which should be $5,088. So all we have to do is take that balance of $54.37 minus $5,088. And what do we get there? If we do that, we should get $349. And if that's right, that becomes the payment of cash dividends, the amount that we paid out in cash dividends.